Hi, I'm Addison Peacock, and I'm staring at you through the screen with my hyper-realistic eyes.
And I'm Henry Galley, and if you don't forward this video to 10 friends and spread the word, you'll be seeing me again tonight at 3 a.m. I swear we haven't actually killed Gus. He is editing this right now, probably putting fun sayings around the bottom of the screen. But if you are hungry for more Gus, don't worry, because me and him recorded a 5-hour-long video where we are going down the disturbing books iceberg and coming up with silly, wholesome pitches for each of its, weird, depraved titles. That's just taking a while to edit, but it will be well worth the wait. But Addison, why are we here today?
Well, I hope you guys are hungry, because we've got a batch of creepypasta.
Mamma mia!
Previously, we did a video where we sort of did a cross-section of the current state of the No Sleep subreddit to sort of evaluate some of the top stories of recent time and see what its general offerings are like now in terms of scariness, quality, etc. We had a real mixed bag.
Mm-hmm.
But what if that bag was even more mixed?
Yeah, because you will find a fascinatingly mixed bag over at the Creepypasta wiki, which I believe predates No Sleep by quite some time, and because it's really more of an archive than a competitive place, it has ones from all different time periods, some classics that were born back in the ex-post days, and ones that floated around in chain emails, and even some classic horror stories, ones by Edgar Allan Poe and Lovecraft and Ambrose Bierce, which would immediately be nuked off of No Sleep for not following the rules.
It's true. Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge would not last on fucking...
Look, how could he have written this if he was hanged? Doesn't make sense, does it?
Literally. So what we did for this particular one is the Creepypasta Wiki has a thing where they have a POTM, a pasta of the month, that is featured by the admins of the site once a month. So I just gathered every pasta of the month from this year so far. So I have 8 stories. Yes, 8, even though we're recording this in September, because one of the stories was chosen twice in a row, and you will never guess which one it was.
We are, in fact, not going to tell you until the end to see if you can guess.
Yes. I would like you to try. I invite you heartily to try and guess before I reveal which one was chosen twice.
Yeah.
Also, speaking of engagement farming.
Great segue. Very organic.
I say that as a joke, but earnestly, something we'd really, really like to do for a future video in this, another installment in this sort of series we've started here, is please... I really, really would love to encourage folks to leave comments giving us recommendations for either creepypastas or no sleep stories that you think would actually scare us.
Yeah, because as we've seen in these previous ones, sometimes the admins or even the upvotes really don't tell the whole story and don't necessarily put the best foot forward, but we have seen in previous videos of this kind that you folks have left really excellent, thoughtful, hilarious comments about these different stories, and frankly, we would love to do a video, or if we get enough, a series of videos where we are specifically going through and rating ones that you guys have recommended to us on the basis of you think we'd really enjoy them. So whether it's Creepypasta, No Sleep, or some real weird niche place we've never even heard of, sound off in the comments and we'll be collating those for a future video.
Yeah!
So, without further ado, shall we get into our offering? Because we have 8 stories to get through of wildly varying quality, stratospheric highs, and abyssal lows. What do we start with, Addison?
So we're starting with Happy Sun Daycare. I was so worried that they were gonna do some, real nasty shit with this.
Yeah, because we have definitely encountered some stories that go there, or in the case of our last No Sleep one, stories that definitely try to make you think they're going there to hit you with a swerve. And I think it was one of those things where going into this, it's a little bit, whenever kids are involved, there's that kind of, because there's not the same guardrails that you see in traditionally published fiction. People really can say anything for better and for worse online. But we will say up top with this one, it doesn't go there. As we said before, every single one of these will be linked in the description of this, and we thoroughly recommend that you read them all and form your own opinion, because we're absolutely going to spoil them in the description, and we don't want to prejudice you if this would be a story that you end up really enjoying. But yeah, I gotta say, this left a lot to be desired, man.
So, basic summary, the writer works for a news blog.
The very plain, kind of unadorned prose of this, it doesn't really make you believe that this person works in professional journalism. I'm sorry.
I would have believed it more if it was like a school report or something.
Yeah, I think that would have stretched the suspension of disbelief a lot less. And just the idea of, like, you know, looking into what really happened at the Happy Sun daycare isn't the most, like, hard-hitting journalism.
Well, it's also really funny because there's no implication in the beginning of the story that anything bad happened to the daycare. They're like, it closed. Because I'm going to read the chunk that makes me laugh rereading it, I'm sorry to say, but it says, I had decided to write a report on the Happy Sun daycare for the news blog I worked for. For one thing, several people around today had gone to that daycare. I figured it might make for an interesting story to read about their experiences. It's like people in your town went to a daycare that used to be there and is closed now. That's not a story.
Yeah, it really feels like this character here had a certain conclusion that they were hoping for, and it was because this is actually, I think, a real, like, motif of unintentional comedy that appears throughout this story as they're interviewing the sort of various people who either worked at this daycare or were, like, kids there. They do a lot of editorializing around different things, and that becomes particularly funny when they're speaking to some of the later people. Like, initially, he talks to someone who worked at the kind of, like, infant division of the daycare, and it's so odd how all of these people will report kind of menacing things happening there, but they won't lead with it. Like, she'll be like, yeah, no, it was honestly a pretty easy time, you know, working with babies. It is what it is. Like, toddlers, they don't have high demands. You just make sure they have their, like, milk at regular intervals, and it's pretty chill. And then he'll be like, did anything weird happen? And she'd be like, well, now you say that, there was, like, screaming behind a locked door. And it's like,
literally,
as if that wouldn't be your, like, primary memory that you associate with this place.
It's so funny. Again, I think, you know, not to try to fix the story, because I don't really know that I'm qualified to do that, but a way to, like, frame it that would have improved this dramatically is as if, like, it is to open with there being a central mystery, like, right? Like, being like, the daycare closed one day and no one would talk about why. But there's nothing like that. They're just like, there was a daycare and then it closed, and I thought I should ask people what it was like to work there.
And it immediately opens up into these bizarre happenings that's like, it's insane that there was never an official police investigation into this, because the first woman he interviews, I just looked back in, and is called Margaret, and on top of the screaming, she's like, yeah, sometimes kids were scratched and bitten, which is such an insane thing to mention. And then there's this great line, said with heavy scare quotes. The narrator says, were there any animals in the area? I decided to ask. Stray dogs, raccoons, perhaps a possum nest? I doubt it. Pets weren't allowed at the daycare, and traps were set up to keep any wildlife away. There might have been a dog roaming around the area. Margaret shook her head.
And then she's like, I did hear a dog. And it's like, but you just said there weren't animals.
You just said there would definitely not be any animals. Maybe a dog.
I did hear a dog.
Like, these people would fold in the witness box immediately.
It's really funny. And then they talk to a guy who went there.
And he was like, I remember there being a menacing door that we all called the Grey Door that they would put naughty kids behind, and you'd just hear screaming and growling.
Literally, like, it's so funny because they, again, just like the previous person, he starts off and he's like, it was pretty normal. I liked it. There was the scary door.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's like, yeah, no, I had a mostly chill time. They did set dogs on the naughty kids, but I think other than that, you know, you're never going to get a perfect daycare.
He's like, there were kids who had scratches on them when they left the Grey Door. Again, no parents brought this up.
Yeah, it would be like if there was a new restaurant in town, and a friend of yours went, and you were wondering whether to go yourself. So you were like, hey, how was that new restaurant? And they were like, oh, believe me, they had, like, the most delicious lasagna there. A dude was shot in the head in, like, a mafia-style hit right next to me, but you can't fault it for the quality of the lasagna.
Kind of reaches a point where you've mentioned this in the previous video, which is that confusion is like the biggest immersion breaker. And so much of how the information is revealed and like the way that people react to information is so unnatural and weird that it immediately makes you go, what?
Yeah, and the thing is, I imagine even if you haven't read this, which you should have, but it is what it is, you're here in the video, welcome.
I'm here now.
Even if we've not given you all the clues, you probably listening to this already have put together that this is a werewolf thing, as I think both me and Addison
Henry, what do you mean?
did. I know, it's so obtuse. This is another thing that is a larger meta flaw of this story, in that you realize what the quote-unquote twist is so early, but it keeps going for such a long time before you actually get to that twist. But it's extra funny how the narrator gets all of this information and he doesn't put any of it together. He's like the worst journalist ever.
It's true. Also, I made predictions about all of the stories before I read them, and my prediction for this one before I started reading it was that the daycare was haunted or there were demons at the daycare, and I was obviously wrong.
Though I do think, if anyone wants to steal this premise, demon daycare, where a, like, human babysitter has to run a daycare for the children of literal demons, and they have kind of sitcom-style hijinks, that, I think, would be a very charming premise that people are welcome to take if they like.
I think that would be pretty cute. And then they go talk to Alice, and they're
I'm
like...
I'm sorry, I'm obsessed with Alice. There is
she was
so
arrested
much
2 weeks
weird...
ago for spraying graffiti.
Yeah, and it, and it says, rather than spend time in jail, she agreed to do 4 months of community service. Is this set in Pyongyang and they just haven't told us this? Like, who is going to jail for graffiti?
That's true. It is usually you get a fine thing.
Yeah, like, that is not a jailable offense. But it's the same as, like, he keeps, like, weirdly imposing, like, oh, Alice seems like the criminal type, but awful things must have happened to her. Again, I have to read this section here.
Please do it.
This is so funny. Alice took a few deep breaths and began to regain her composure. If the mere mention of the grey door room was enough to put the fear into her after all those years, I couldn't help but dread what horrors she could have experienced. Here was someone who had had run-ins with the law, someone who had been arrested for various crimes, primarily theft, vandalism, and trespassing, and yet it was something from her childhood that caused her the most fear of being punished. Why? Well, I mean, I would answer that question with, I think in most prison systems, they don't set dogs on you for petty theft and vandalism.
I'm gonna say it. I actually think it would have been scarier to find out that the dog in the room was actually a person in a dog costume.
Yeah, because that would have been kind of like unscrutable and creepy. I think it takes it from like the kind of very stock fear of werewolves to like, okay, this is a pervert.
Yeah. Well, I also just don't find the werewolf, like, it just is kind of like, why'd they have a werewolf?
And I cannot stress enough, I think this is a really good example of how sometimes the creative allowances specific to the Creepypasta Wiki do not help with the stories. There is a stock photo of what Meg said literally looks like Insanity Wolf from the meme, with a caption that says,
It's so funny.
the alleged dog, in quotes, that attacked various children at Happy Sun Daycare.
I don't even remember who Mr. Smith is.
Mr. Smith
he's the one,
is
the narcolepsy
werewolf.
one.
He's like, I suffered from narcolepsy, and my aunt would make me a special tea, but I would still be able to work at this daycare, and they were all very, like, accommodating to my disability. Sometimes I'd fall asleep, and I'd wake up in the grey room, and have no idea what happened.
Henry, do you want to know? I feel really dumb, because I'm only just now realizing that he was the werewolf.
I mean, in your defense, Addison, it is not the most clearly written prose. This is, funnily enough, I think a detail that we are going to discuss for a few different stories in this roster, which I find is a unique bad quality to the bad creepypastas compared to the bad no-sleep stories is what you might call the quotidian fog, where they just bury you in random pointless details that mean nothing, and you lose the important bits in amongst it.
It's true. The story after this is the worst offender. I also think the reason I never put that together is because daycare happens during the day and werewolf transformations happen at nighttime.
Yeah, they really play fast and loose with it. There doesn't really seem to be any kind of rhyme or reason to this. And don't get me wrong. Obviously, I think people are allowed to play fast and loose with the lore of stock monsters.
But I do think you need to make it clear if you're going to do that.
People who are fans of our work from our No Sleep podcast days, which we discussed a little bit in the previous video, may know that not only did you and me collaborate on a werewolf story for the No Sleep podcast, which was 500 Yards, which was kind of a almost slightly Wolf Creek-esque take on the werewolf
really
mythos.
Really put the wolf in Wolf Creek.
Yeah, of teenage track team members being chased across a clearing in the woods by a scary, very serial killer coded werewolf woman. But an equally and very different take on werewolves was Meg's story, also written for the No Sleep podcast, which had
story.
You in it as well, The Open Secret of East Hall, which incidentally Meg also adapted into an award-nominated screenplay, which was featured at the Renegade Film Festival in Marietta, Georgia, early in the year. So yeah, point is, we are definitely not werewolf haters here. We think there is a lot that can be done with them.
And what did those stories have in common? The werewolves were at night!
It's true. And I mean, that's the thing, even if you want to use the imagery of werewolves in a thing, fans of Killjam Triple X, our audio drama, will know that the first villain that Faustina, the main character, fights is a wolf woman called Levita the She-Wolf, played by the uncomfortably hot Autumn Ivy.
Henry, you're not wrong.
It's true, everyone knows it. But yeah, I think ultimately this story's biggest sin is that it frankly just doesn't do enough with the fun here. It makes this narrator feel like a complete schmuck that he never puts it together, and the story ends on him literally going into the Grey Room, seeing scratches and wolf footprints on the floor, and it ends with a quote-unquote wham line of, "Since when do dogs walk on two legs?" Which is really strange to me, because if it's just a bunch of paw prints on a muddy floor, how on earth would you intuit the configuration of the feet from that?
You wouldn't. I'm gonna tell you that for a second when I read that one, I was like, so was it someone in a dog costume? And then I was like, no, because it wouldn't have feet like that.
Yeah, no, it's... again, I think this story didn't make us mad, but it was frustrating in that I think all of its sins would be infinitely more forgivable if it got in and got out quicker and didn't feel with its sheer length, it was kind of insulting the intelligence of the reader.
Yeah, I think that's, if it was a much shorter story, I'd be like, well, that's kind of a disappointing ending, but that's fine.
Yeah, it at least wouldn't have felt like it thought, wow, you really think I wouldn't have gotten it by this point? Come on, for man, real. Give me some credit.
Okay, but you should talk about length and meandering all you want with that story, but then...
Yeah, oh boy, okay. People who watched our No Sleep video would know the second one was our favorite in that.
Yeah.
Not the case here.
Not so much the case. I didn't think I was going to have to do this for this video, but I just want to go ahead and quickly put in a content warning for violent homophobia and for childhood sexual abuse.
Don't worry, we're going to try and keep this fun while staying within the bounds of good taste.
Yeah, for real. We're not going to belabor it,
places. But... It's called The Sinking House, and it is I mean, the very fact that it has 3 tags, Pastor of the Month, Places, and one tag that is literally just called Long Pasta. They missed a trick not calling that spaghetti.
This is such a tiny note considering what we're going to get into, but I wish it was called The Sunken House, because the house is no longer sinking, the house has sunk. Anyway.
Yeah, it sank ages ago. This is a deeply strange story, and before we get into this, because me and Addison get it, I think my worst teenage creepypasta was one where infamously the twist was that the first person narrator was meth.
Right, I remember that.
So
I
we
blissfully
get it.
didn't actually publish a lot of my younger horrible stories anywhere, or if I did, I wouldn't tell you what they were.
I had that unearned man confidence, so I was putting it fucking everywhere. But no, it's true. But the reason we bring this up is anytime we kind of like criticize these, and even when the criticism is quite harsh, I feel the need to say creating something even that isn't very good is really hard. And it takes a great deal of bravery to put stuff out there.
It does.
So we're not denigrating any of these authors, just, criticizing from our honest, subjective opinion. With that said, Addison, could you kind of logline The Sinking House?
Okay, so it's about a guy who, when he was 13, fell into the lake and saw an underwater house full of, like, ghost stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And as an adult is sort of haunted by both that and the memory of his scoutmaster, who was the, like, counselor of the Boy Scout camp, and who was...
Scoutmaster Jeff.
Who was abusing several of the boys in the troop. And those two things are sort of connected in a way that I don't fully understand.
I would very much bet that the author of this is a big Stephen King fan, because
you can
it
feel
feels
that.
like it is riffing on a lot of, like, Kingian ideas, that kind of mix of childhood trauma echoing into adulthood. This very, like, dark side of, like, Americana with the kind of Boy Scout troop of it all.
It's sort of trying to do an It-esque thing.
I was so, like, jarred when it hits you with the time skip.
Oh, me too. I was like, wait, what do you
couple of thousand
mean?
words in. So the main character of this, Colt, presumably short for Colton Burpo, as mentioned in our previous video, the boy who saw heaven for real. Author of the famous book, The Sunken Ghost House is for Real. Funnily enough, I was expecting these to be much more consistent in style, but there's a really fascinating mix, because obviously the Creepypasta Wiki does not have as nearly kind of stringent rules as No Sleep does. Several of these stories are in third person, and this is one of them, and it immediately gives it a very different vibe to a lot of more traditional Creepypasta.
Yeah, I actually liked it at first because of the different feel and this sort of Stephen Kingian bully dialogue.
Oh, can we please talk about that? I think we both made notes of the insane shit that Benji says.
Yeah, Benji and Caleb, the bullies. I will say, one of my notes before I get into that part, just when the first sort of turn of supernatural stuff happens, I wrote, this is like a Goosebumps, but for slightly older audience, and then I wrote underneath, never mind, it's about child molestation.
Oh no, yeah, R.L. Stein would never, thankfully.
But anyway, yeah, some of the stuff that Benji, so Colt is being chased onto the lake in, like, his canoe by Benji and Caleb, who are two of the other boys in the troop. And Benji is calling him, like, homophobic slurs, because Colt is gay. Benji's calling him homophobic slurs, and then he says the one I'm obsessed with, which is, I will slice you like the fruit you are.
And before he says that even, he says, I should kill you right here, which he says again later to another character. This is someone, like, straight out of an anime, even down to the fact that it later establishes Benji has, like, spiky hair with blue streaks in it, a style that he loved so much he continues to have into adulthood, including at a wedding, and he's accusing other people of being gay?
Now, he's not gay, he's just really into nu metal. It's I should kill you right here. Benji spat into the water, clenching his fists. I will slice you like the fruit you are.
It fully just made me think of the, like, possessed people from the live-action Scooby-Doo movie. You know, that, like, educational tape they watch where someone bumps into one of them, and he's like, I will grind your bones into dust, and, like, crushes his drinking glass in his hand. There's a lot of people dramatically clenching their fists in this story in a way that gives it a very cartoonish
also,
quality.
Obviously, homophobic violence and hate crimes are not funny, but nobody talks like this, and therefore it does make it funny to me.
No, that's the thing. I think it's what makes this story such a bizarre and kind of uncomfortable read is the massive dissonance between the severity of the subject matter and how incredibly, like, unintentionally kind of camp and silly the approach is.
Also, I don't know why this was so funny to me either, but after he says that, he gets out his pocket knife and it says, Colt sighed as Benji drew a pocket knife from his shorts. He was ready for this confrontation, even though he had no idea how to fight. This guy pulled out a pocket knife and Colt goes, okay, here we go.
Again, it's so anime, because you expect then Colt is going to hit them with a, like, forgive me, master, for what I must do, spin kicks the, like, knife out of Benji's hand.
No, he
also, so bizarre that this whole thing is happening while they're in kayaks on a lake.
It's true. Also, he doesn't do that. He just outs Caleb.
Yeah, which is nuts as well. Like, again, it's this kind of complicated thing of... We said gay earlier, but it isn't kind of fully specified, like, what exactly the characters are. Could be, like, you know, pan, bi,
True,
some flavor of queer.
Colt and Caleb are both queer.
Yeah, and basically what happened and you find out, and I think this is quite a good note, because I think this, if it was in a better story, I think could have been a really effective kind of tragic moment of Caleb and Colt have a thing going on. The story has a little bit of a problem with giving characters slightly too similar names at times. We get into that later, where there are two characters called Jade and Jordan as well, but that's by the by. But Caleb and Colt are implied to have a bit of a thing, but Caleb has kind of more, like, internalized homophobia, and when Benji, who is the kind of Henry Bowers of this, saw them together, Caleb was like, oh, Colt was, like, stalking me because he's gay, even though I was trying to tell him to go away, as a way of, like, taking the heat off of himself. So, yeah, again, I think that, to me, feels very tragic and very real, but it's given that it's amidst this kind of, like, if it were not for the laws of this land, I would have slaughtered you tier dialogue.
I also really...
Like, I think the tragedy of that would have felt more palpable.
Talking about things that were really strong about this story, the start of this is so strong. This, like, they're on the lake, and suddenly they hear muffled, old-timey piano music from underneath the water.
Yeah, and that's a recurring theme. Again, I think... They're
eerie and, like, I really thought that was a great idea. I thought that was neat and kind of spooky.
I genuinely think there's a good story in here. This is just a case of, if there was a more judicious editor who came in and was like, look, this is the core, let's cut some of the chaff so we can emphasize the good parts of this, we would be having a very different conversation right now.
So Colt falls into they all fall into the water. This part also really confused me, and maybe I'm dumb, but okay, so they all fall into the water.
No, it was just kind of very, like, this is not written with clarity. If you are looking at the story right now, if you're reading through it, huge chunky paragraphs.
Okay, so this part makes sense, but the thing that happens after, I'm still not entirely sure about what happened here, but anyway, so he falls in the water and sinks to the bottom and wakes up and like blacks out briefly but regains consciousness in this underwater house. Very spooky thing, awesome, great setting. I've seen it done before once in a horror movie that was not done to full success, so I was like, okay, I'd love to see that. He swims out of there, he gets out and he sees, like, weird scary stuff down there. He sees a little boy, a little blonde boy in there, and he sees, like, portraits, and then he swims. He can't get out, but then he gets out and he finally makes it out of the water. But Benji and Caleb are completely dry and they're in their boats.
Yeah, no, that bit was really confusing, because then Scoutmaster Jeff appears and they kind of all do a bit of a, like, baby, you're being crazy.
Well, and I'm confused just because
to Colt,
I'm like,
when he comes out of the water.
It's not that I don't mind when, like, stuff is mindfucky or ambiguous, but I genuinely am not sure what is supposed to have happened there.
It's me slamming my hand on the biggest immersion breaker button again, which sadly comes up quite a bit. I also thought it was a very strange choice of words, that when they're describing, like, the portraits in this house, which we later find out sank during the 1800s.
It says pixelated?
He describes them as being, pixelated, which just isn't a word you'd use for what are presumably painted portraits.
Yeah, I think it's trying to evoke what they would look like, but it is also very confusing and immersion breaking.
I think this is a story that really could have benefited from being in first person. So we got more of, like, Colt's
I was gonna say, because so
editorializing
much of
on
it
this.
is talking about Colt's thought process and his and like the things he feels and believes, it is odd that it's in third person.
There is a lot of just kind of weird, confusing, kind of what you might call blocking and staging in film parlance, where it's difficult to know kind of where stuff is in relation to each other.
I can't tell if Benji and Caleb were never out in the water with him, or if they somehow got out of the water and dried off and are now gaslighting him. Benji's like, says Benji has suspiciously watery eyes and is like, we were so worried when you came out here by yourself. It seems like they're in on it.
Yeah, well, Benji, he, when they climbed out of the water, he was like, we need to drive quick before Scoutmaster Jeff comes. And he's like, don't worry, bro, I got you. And he sucked up all the water with his eyes. And that's why they were suspiciously watery. I think it's like, oh, I swear I saw, like, a small fish swim past his pupil. But yeah, this is really odd. And then we meet Jordan, who will become our kind of, I think Deuteragonist is giving him too much credit, sidekick of Colt.
He's the sidekick.
Who gets all of the quirks.
What is Jordan's fucking deal?
Yeah, he reminds me a lot of, this is a little bit of a Wanna deep cut. Gus will put a link to it on screen or something right now. But
Yes.
Jordan reminded me a lot of Sylvester Stevens from The Beasties, which was this pilot that Gus wrote when he was a teenager that he made a video dissecting. Because much like Sylvester, he's like all quirks all the way down. Like, he loves the X-Files and has like a big X-Files t-shirt. He claimed that he saw the weird like young scout ghost before as well, and you find out later that like he tried to become a YouTuber and dropped out of school. What I find is really funny is that the third person narrator, kind of, I guess, extrapolating from Colt's mind, constantly talks shit on Jordan.
It's true.
Because, like, there's a bit when he's like, Colt never went back to Scouts after that day. Jordan stayed there, and that was fine. He didn't need a friend who would only be weird and eccentric when it suited him, despite the fact he would then continue to kind of be good friends with Jordan throughout the rest of the story as he grew up.
Yeah, it's true. Also, okay, so the thing we've skipped over is that Scoutmaster Jeff tells him about the sinking house, which is a house where, like, a family tried to push their house across the frozen lake, and it sunk down into the lake.
Which, look, I'm sure that's based on some real thing that happened, but I can't not picture the, like, pedophile disguised as a school from Petergeddon just pushing a house along this, like, frozen thing. And it's one of those things that, like, I'm sorry, but you put a whole house on skis and kicked it onto a frozen lake. What the fuck did you think was gonna happen, guys?
Well, it was the late 1800s. People did all kinds of shit.
People knew how ice worked.
And then they all talk about the legend, and then he hears the music again, and maybe Caleb hears the music again. I don't know. It's Swanee River, by the way. So he tells Jordan about what happened, getting chased out onto the lake, and how he found the sunken house. See, Jordan calls it the sunken house, by the way. He was in the sunken house. They keep calling it the sunken house. I knew I wasn't making it up. That's why my brain kept wanting to call it the sunken house.
I wonder if they changed the title because this was released a similar time to Get Out. Yeah, and we're like, well, fuck, they've taken the sunken place. So I have to call this the sinking house. Because crucially, this is a really vital bit of context. This is a little bit different to our No Sleep video in the pastor of the month does not have to have come from that month. The first story we read was from 2014. So these are spread all the way around.
But they were just being spotlighted this year. Okay, he tells him about the ghost, and then they're like up there and they're talking, and then they fall asleep on the dock. And then on the water, it's 3 a.m. and the Scoutmaster is out on the water with one of the campers.
Yeah, which is crazy that he's like there are so many odd implications of this, and it's going to get weirder when we get to the reveal of what the actual supernatural element of this is. Is it that he's like abusing these kids and then Fredo from The Godfather 2 style taking them out to the middle of the lake and like killing them and dextering them off of it? Who is to say? But we find out later, spoilers, that like Colt and others were also abused.
Well, and also there's a weird bit too where it says when he tried to convince Jordan they should tell someone, he insisted that all the boys were accounted for and they had no proof. So who was on the boat with Scoutmaster Jeff?
This is where we get into the twist, which we'll describe in a minute. But to set that up, later on in life we get a time skip. They're all university age, and they are all invited to Caleb's wedding. Why the fuck they choose to go is an absolute mystery to me, especially considering that Caleb is hosting his wedding at the campgrounds where all of this happened with the sinking house.
The officiating minister of the wedding is Scoutmaster Jeff.
Like, he's a Scoutmaster and a priest? There was no chance.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think you could not throw up more red flags as one dude than this dude. But they all decide, fuck it, we'll go to the weird cursed campground to attend the wedding of someone who hate crime to be in my youth. Why not? And they arrive, and, like, the thing is, so much happens in this that if we went blow by blow...
No, we'd be all night.
We would be giving you the whole video.
We'd be here all night.
Essentially, weird, spooky stuff happens at the wedding.
The ghost child appears.
Yes, the ghost child. And the ghost child keeps saying, you have to save us or you have to help us?
I thought it was you have to tell the truth.
He says a bunch of different things. This guy's got catchphrases coming out of his ears.
Mm-hmm, I'm scrolling. And there's cranberry and goat cheese baguettes, though. I'm glad we know that there's cranberry and goat cheese baguettes there.
The quotidian fog rolls over us yet again. Because we did not in a million years need to know anything about the catering at this cursed wedding.
He sees visions of everybody in their scout uniforms as being kids. He says, if you tell the truth, you will save us all.
Okay, here is my interpretation of what happened here.
Okay, please tell me.
We get a late stage reveal that the ghost here is, the ghost kid is the ghost of Scoutmaster Jeff as a child, because they introduce the Japanese ghost lore of the Ikrio. This idea of if a person is put into like a sufficient state of like emotional distress or despair or something like that, there can be a living ghost of them while they were alive. And for me, the implication is, and why they decided to earlier draw attention to the idea of, but all of the kids were accounted for, is that as Scoutmaster Jeff abused each of these kids, it kind of, metaphorically speaking, killed their innocence
and created a ghost of their child selves.
An Ikrio of them at that moment. Exactly.
Got it. And all of the Ikrios are at the bottom of the lake in that house.
Trapped in the sinking house. Which, again, this is a pretty cool concept if it was executed better.
Yes.
Like, it's honestly, like, I've been talking to a lot of people who have, like, DID lately, and it's described as a similar thing of this kind of, like, the mind and the personality fragmenting at a moment of trauma, and this Ikrio actually, stands as a pretty good metaphor for what can be a really real psychological phenomenon for people who undergo traumatic experiences.
Also, I mentioned this to you off mic, and I'll say it here now. One of the things I do want to give this story credit for is that it is tackling some extreme subject matter, and despite the kind of silly dialogue with the homophobia early on, it is tackling its intense subject matter from a place clearly of intention to be compassionate and sensitive and thoughtful. It is not trying to be exploitative. It is not trying to use it for shock value. It is trying to actually explore through a supernatural allegory the ramifications of that kind of trauma. And so even though I think it fails to do what it's trying to do, I want to make it clear that there are stories that I really for example, a story we talked about in the No Sleep video that deliberately tries to evoke the idea of sexual violence and then uses that to sort of do a twist and be like, did you think? No, it's not. Whereas this is actually trying to earnestly explore the subject, and I want to make sure I give credit where credit's due on that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Genuinely, I'm probably about to cause some division because people are really weird about this guy for reasons unknown. But I think if you took this as an outline and gave this exact concept to Mike Flanagan, you got yourself a stew going.
I agree.
I
actually had the same exact thought, and I agree. I'm also a really big fan of his work.
I really enjoy his stuff as well, and I think, again, I think he's the natural guy to go to, because when you think of stuff that clearly very much exists in the lineage of the body of work of Stephen King, but evolved for a bit more of a modern palette, I think Flanagan is the guy that you think of. And again, in this case, the idea of, And it's so funny because when I was actually reading it, I think I was so kind of lost in the minutiae of fucking Jordan's YouTube channel and the lobster bisque at the wedding and all this other stuff that I almost missed for the kind of Forest of the Trees what a genuinely kind of affecting idea it is of revealing the truth of what happened here will help free the imprisoned innocences of all these, like, trauma survivors.
Yes.
Trapped, effectively underwater in that kind of, like, being unable to breathe, unable to move on. And as you've probably predicted by this point, because let's be real, the second you've put this together, you know exactly how this is going to end. Of course, it ends with a confrontation with Scoutmaster Jeff.
Of course.
Out on the lake, where all is revealed and the spirits drag him to a watery grave.
Of course.
Because obviously that was going to happen.
Yeah, like, come on.
I think if each of these stories there is a thing that we could learn from it, I think this is one of those that show your work to other people.
Yes.
And when people seem to really be responding to an idea that you have, in the edit, be a little bit ruthless. Cut the stuff that might seem like little and fun to you, but doesn't feed into that overall idea, and you are going to be left with a much leaner, meaner thing that gets your idea across better than if you were thinking, I'm going to have this be long for length's sake to give it a kind of epic tone.
You know what's funny, though, is as we've discussed it, I'm feeling a lot kinder to the story than I was when I first read it.
Same! Well, but, and that's the thing, Addison, it is because in discussing it, we've had to truncate it and just focus on the bits that matter. For audience members who haven't read this to have our experience, we would have to painstakingly recount all of the bullshit that ultimately meant nothing to the story in this video, and I think they'd get equally tired of hearing it.
It's true. I think that of all the stories, I think that we read from this is the one that is, if I think that one or two really thoughtful edits would make this something very good.
Agreed. The moral of the story is, if you have a good idea, dig it up and polish it off. Don't bury it.
Yes. And also, like, I don't know that this didn't go through multiple drafts, but it seems like it didn't, and there's a reason editing is helpful.
It's true. So I think that is the longest we'll likely spend on one story in this
It is
thing,
also the longest story, I think.
It is. It's really long, and I don't think any of them are nearly as heavy in terms of subject matter, which I think leads us quite nicely to our
we're going to pivot to one, and now for something completely different.
Completely different. And it really is.
Is.
This is a fascinatingly... say what you will about the mods of the Creepypasta wiki, but when they pick Pasta of the Month, they definitely do not favor any one particular style or subject matter or anything. These selections are legitimately diverse.
Yeah, I really did appreciate how genuinely different all of them are. I wasn't particularly excited by this story, but I was excited by how different it was. This one's called The Twisting Withers. It is not so much a horror story as much as it is like a very dark fantasy story. You described it as feeling like Bloodborne.
Yeah, it has a very Bloodborne aesthetic. It also reminds me and Addison are both huge Baldur's Gate 3 fans, as Charlie and Meg also are. You may have seen Charlie and Gus discussing it in their very underrated video on how making your characters in RPGs can be a good writing tool. But it was really giving the Shadow-Cursed lands.
Yes.
From Baldur's Gate 3. It's basically that the plot of this is that a pair of characters who are Horus and Crassus are going through the Twisting Withers, which is this kind of cursed, corrupted, again, very Shadowlands
petrified forest
area. Yeah, this petrified forest that is beset with, like, shadows and cursed evil magical darkness, and they have to take this very particular road. They have, again, weirdly, much like the Shadow-Cursed lands, these, like, magical lanterns that will burn things that are affected by the dark if they get too close. And Horus has this, like, I think, like, a double-barreled shotgun with, like, silver buckshot.
Yes.
And has to, like, guard it as it's going through. And Crassus, who is the more kind of, like, wizened, elderly, almost kind of Quint from Jaws style.
Yeah. Well,
like,
this is Horace's
old-timer.
first time, I believe.
Yeah, it also, another thing it really reminded me of that Meg brought up too is for any of our shadow and boneheads in the audience, it was really giving the Fold from that. Just that classic kind of, I think, dark fantasy trope of, like, the blighted lands.
Yes. And I really did enjoy a lot of, like a lot of stories tend to be, I think it had a much stronger setup than payoff, but I really enjoyed the sort of establishing stuff where Crassus is, like, giving him all the advice, and he's like, this is why we do it this way, and he's like, they won't risk an attack, don't waste your shot, they're gonna try to scare you, to get you to shoot off into the dark, and that's when they'll swoop in. You're not gonna pull that trigger unless one is at point blank range. You got that?
Yeah, and that is really good because establishing that early in that sort of classic Hitchcock bomb under the table type way has you feeling really nervous for, like, what is to come. I think fantasy fans and people who are real, like, world building heads will dig this. I think that it has a very kind of Victorian Gothic, like, fantasy prose that I think is pretty cool.
I really enjoyed a lot of the dialogue from Crassus specifically. I really liked the line I highlighted that I really liked from him was, nothing here but dead trees that won't rot, nothing living here but things what can't die.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of pictured these two guys as Willem Dafoe and
Yes!
Robert Pattinson
Yes!
from The Lighthouse. That's the vibe they're giving, the, like, kind of
vibe.
salty old sea
That is
dog,
their
and the, like,
vibe.
more, like... That is absolutely Wake and Winslow were in my mind during this. And I think the strongest part of the story genuinely is before a monster even shows up. Just this bit when they're going through and they're like, oh god, what's it going to be? Where's it going to come from?
The other line I loved when they were talking to each other was Horace asking Crassus if they can talk, like if the blighted, like, or whatever they're called, the twisted, can talk. And Crassus says, if we don't listen, it don't matter, now do it.
Yeah, no, someone get Willem Dafoe, get Robert Pattinson, we can make some magic here. Something that was going through my mind, and I mentioned this a little bit to you yesterday, I think this story is a little bit a casualty of the fact that there aren't nearly enough places on the internet that are hosts for interesting original fiction. Yeah. Like, I think it's wonderful that there are these places that are very welcoming to, like, horror fiction, but I would love if there were places that were able to kind of rack up similar traffic to some of the bigger, like, creepypasta or, like, fanfiction sites for original fiction of all genres, because you obviously, if you're making comics, for example, you can really rack up an audience on webtoons. If you're like us and the rest of the Warner crew, we turn a lot of our written stuff into audio drama because we know that, like, podcasting is a very accessible thing. But there is just a real shame that there isn't really a home for prose that isn't kind of horror or creepypasta, and it's why something like this that feels much more like the first chapter of a dark fantasy novel,
not like a fully contained short story.
Yeah,
and it's a book I might like to read.
No, it's true. I think there is some really fun potential here, and I think it's well written as well. And I think if you are the kind of person who enjoys your fantasy familiar but with a twist, because the biggest sort of monster that they fight in this is a like a twisted troll, which is like a troll but is kind of like warped. It's described as like having these like big like kind of gnarled like flaps of skin. It's very it's giving like the kind of Chernobyl elephant's foot. And I think it's a case of, I'll admit, this is one that I think was good for what it was trying to do. I don't think I have as much to say about it, because it is one that clearly had its intention. It, you know, knew what it wanted to do, and it did it. It lost me a little bit at the end when the sorcerer appeared and was making his kind of Russian sleep experiment evil end monologue.
Yeah. It's something a lot of creepypastas, unfortunately, even when they're not true original style creepypastas, fall into, which is a big villain monologue at the end.
but I think on the whole, there is a lot to enjoy here, especially if you're a dark fantasy fan. Again, I think this is something where, to declare our own biases, we have, as we often mention on this show, Meg's audio drama, The Kingmaker Histories, which you can find here. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Addison plays one of the major villains in it, another dark sorceress. Ariadne Culver, Mistress of the Flesh.
And you're not wrong.
And it has a very similar thing in it. There's a really interesting kind of cursed setting in the Kingmaker Histories called the Seltzenwald, which is a forest which has been affected by the kind of residual dimensional spill of portals to the Feywild. And as a result, the Seltzenwald has both freakish monsters like the Mantelope, which are dinosaur wolf mantis things, and they are kind of geographically displaced. Time moves at different speeds. It's impossible to go around. There is even an amazing episode in, I want to say, either season 2 or 3, where Johnny Sims, yes, that Johnny Sims from the Magnus Archives, plays the leader of a band of soldiers who have been trapped in the Seltzenwald for 25 years and have become completely insane cannibals. And it's hilarious and messed up. So we're really predisposed to enjoy stories like this. And if you enjoy this, definitely go check out The Kingmaker Histories wherever you get your audio dramas. But Addison, I think this is weirdly quite a good segue to the next story, one that we really both enjoyed.
Yes! Oh my god, I loved this story. So the next story we read was The Influencing Machine, which you know what's so funny is... Don't judge a book by its cover, because out of all the stories on the list, this was the one that when I saw the title, I had an oh, brother.
Yeah, no, it had that title, and it really didn't help itself that it was the only story that had both, an epigraph, which reads, "A great civilization is not conquered from without until it has destroyed itself within. Will Durant, The Story of Philosophy," and a, scientific diagram at the start. So I think we were really ready.
I was so ready to hate it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you my fucking prediction for this one. I wrote prediction. It will be pretentious. I was wrong.
This is a genuinely fantastic piece of sci-fi horror.
I really, really liked this story.
This one is a total mindfuck, and like we said of the scary, a guy keeps beckoning my children from the other window in the No Sleep one, if literally any of the stories you wanted to take the chance to experience unspoiled, please let it be this one, because I think this one is a genuine mindfuck on purpose, and I'm delighted by it.
It's not confusing because it's inept, it's confusing because it is making you experience confusion alongside its narrator's loss of a sense of understanding of the world around him.
Exactly. So, speaking of which, the narrator is a nameless employee at a big tech company called Neurowork, and our kind of inception point for this story is that they have introduced a new piece of technology that they call the homunculus. And it is this, strange little artificial being, just like the homunculus of kind of alchemical mythology, that after spending time around people, begins to be able to imitate them. It's initially this kind of weird, fucked up little guy, but it gets better.
And it changes the way it looks.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
It is a shapeshifter. It is an amalgamator, and it's introduced as this kind of weird bit of curio technology that is kind of we don't really know what we'd use this for, but here is a test one, and we're going to keep it around the office. It's your gift. You can all enjoy the homunculus.
I love it. I want to read it this little bit.
Go for it.
This little bit here. The initial description. Blurry, smeared features sank and melted apart, continuously forming anew. Faces were perceivable but indiscriminate, as if they weren't meant to be looked at quite so closely. Its glossy skin stretched over a pair of arms and legs at least twice as wide as the head that accompanied them, contorted towards a boxy torso which itself supplemented a naked, sexless groin. The blank box it had come in was splayed out beneath it, an instruction manual nowhere to be seen. Layers of plastic were mostly pulled loose, save for remaining piled shreds, almost leaving the impression of a nest.
Like, the prose of this one is really good. It's really good. And
it's really strong.
And I think it immediately sells this as this great little piece of, like, weird techno horror. I was joking that this is the movie that Lee Whannell should have made instead of his bafflingly awful Wolfman movie, after him making the really fantastic Upgrade and arguably even better Invisible Man.
Yeah, like, what the fuck?
But no, so essentially, in a thing that I think really reflects a lot of our anxieties around the kind of place that technology, and particularly kind of generative AI, has in our lives, in our workplaces, this homunculus sits there and is just slowly getting better at pretending to be people around the office in a way that is increasingly kind of uncanny. And essentially, the horror that this story plays on is the fact that at a point of knowing that this technology exists and can get good enough to do this, you realize that you can no longer have inherent faith that anything you encounter out in the world is actually real and not just another one of these.
Yes, so you have the narrator sort of becoming increasingly sort of freaked out and paranoid about this thing. I was obsessed. I loved the sequence where it's like bring your kid to work day, and one of the employees, one of his coworkers, brings her son, Kai, and he walks in to find Kai sitting and talking with the homunculus. He can't hear what they're saying, but like he hears them talking to each other, and then walks in and they're completely quiet, and that freaked me the fuck out.
It's a real slow burn. Like, that there is a lot of pre-existing horror that this thing is in conversation with. Definitely, I think particularly the 70s Donald Sutherland invasion of the Body Snatchers and that kind of slow thing. It directly references The Thing, which doesn't feel out of place or gratuitous, given that it's that very similar kind of people turning against each other. I love this scene where, as the paranoia is starting to mount, the narrator kind of has this breakdown while he's, like, ordering food at a drive-thru at a McDonald's, and it's like, are you a real person? To the person. He actually goes inside and, like, assaults the person at the thing, like, pushes them up against a wall.
Yeah, because the guy won't say that he is, and he's like, just say it if you are, just say you are.
And that feels particularly meaningful. Again, we're getting headlines all the time about these, like, stupid applications of, like, AI in drive-thrus causing problems, like the hilarious
18,000 water cups at Taco Bell.
And what will you have to drink with that? Yeah, exactly. Like, there are a lot of very pointed references. Like, in Ditto 4, there is a scene later on where we're going kind of out of order on this one, but I think, to be honest, this is not a story that would benefit from us kind of rehashing it beat by beat, because
the bit that is the most like linear thing that happens before the paranoia starts to get really bad is that the thing is suddenly gone from the office.
Yeah. And but that's the question.
Is it
gone from the office?
It's no longer being displayed where it was.
Like, it's like that whole thing of, like, the only thing scarier than, like, seeing a spider in your house is seeing a spider looking away and then not seeing the spider.
No, literally. It's just really, I didn't get, like, really, really, really scared by any of the stories. This is the closest I got. This one really was very tense, and I, like, couldn't stop reading it.
No, that's the thing. I think for me, we both sort of agreed that none of the stories we discussed today had that kind of immediate, visceral, like, look over your shoulder horror that the guy in the window from the No Sleep video evoked. But for me, this was a wonderful story that, I think this is a term that gets thrown around a lot, but it legitimately evoked existential dread.
Yes.
This idea of, like, our lives and our place in the culture that we exist in, this increasing sense of, like, technologically induced social alienation. Like, I think what's honestly kind of genius about this story, while I think it is maybe a similar length to the Sinking House, it never feels long, and I think it manages to hide almost several different horror stories in it. Like, I love this fantastic, like, kind of part of it where he meets this girl online called Cynthia, and it's this thing of, like, him meeting her, and they go to an art museum, and she talks to him about, like, these art exhibit that they discuss, like, the Luddites. They talk about this art exhibit where, like, all of the pieces were made by animals, but it's like, oh, but we don't credit the animals, we just credit the guy who trained them, because surely that's the work. Again, this story it's very intertextual,
Yes.
it's very literary. There are a lot of, like, that there are references to the, like, the Da Vinci Vitruvian Man, references to alchemy and, like, mathematics and computing. This is a very erudite story without ever feeling like it's just, like, flexing the author's book collection at you.
In spite of that, it doesn't ever match, in my opinion, my prediction of thinking it was going to be pretentious.
This is such a weird thing to say, but it's a story that makes you feel smart when you're reading it.
No, I get what you mean, because it feels like it's very engaging.
Yeah, it has just that great, like, techno-thriller vibe to it.
Also, oh man, when he gets, I love this shit. When he gets to her apartment, and I love something like this where he's like, something was wrong and I couldn't figure out what yet. My eyes were telling me something was very wrong. My brain just hadn't caught up yet. And when he realizes that all of her pictures in her apartment are like AI generated or fake.
Yeah, because again, there's that great tell of the fingers being fucked up. Because, like, yeah, it was a photo of her with someone who I must assume must have been like an aunt or a grandmother, but she had polydactyly because she had too many fingers. And then, when he realizes that this is fake, he starts grabbing books off her bookshelf, and they're all blank.
Yes!
This is so, we referenced the Magnus Archives earlier, this is some Avatar of the Stranger shit. It is so scary.
Yeah.
I
freaked me
love
out
this.
so bad. And there's this, like, unexplained presence of this, like eye-searing bright light, like, pouring out from under her bedroom door, and then he runs.
And I think what's great is this story does something that I love and that I think is a very rare thing to pull off, but it manages it, is it feels like it is, well, I say it feels like it is showing an apocalypse, but from a very small subjective perspective. And throughout you get these little hints of ways that, like, there are these global conflicts and kind of, like, ecological collapse and these, like, disastrous technological things happening of, like, acid rain and, like, dangerous, like, gases unleashed in the city that have, like, blown in from, like, other conflicts. And we found out doing some background research, because we were so fascinated by this story, that this is part of a kind of, like, thematic trilogy. It's the middle section in this thematic trilogy by the author Corn Connick, who is actually I don't mind saying this person's name because they're actually an admin on the Creepypasta wiki.
Yes.
So Corn Connick, if you're watching this, fucking kudos, buddy. Amazing job.
Good job. The story ends with him being committed. And then in the hospital, he's scheduled for a brain surgery, but nobody comes. Nobody's come. It says nobody came to my room since, and no one in the entire ward has made a sound.
Yeah, it's basically the world ended while he was in the psych ward.
The old world would be better off remembered for what it was anyway. I think the worst is the light. The sun is blinding at all hours, and so is the bulb. Even the brightness of the monitor is agonizing. In the space, the tissue on my forehead is stretched apart, shadowed by midday dust. I can't see where one beam begins and another ends.
And that's the end
I really
of it.
liked that story.
It's so good. In many ways, what I really love about this, and why I'm so glad that we landed on this as one to discuss today, is this, to me, felt like a much better, more evolved story of that classic Matt Diamersky creepypasta, Psychosis, that I feel like gets brought up in a lot of lists.
Yes, I agree.
Like, I think this is a much better take on that exact same paranoia without some of the potentially kind of, like, iffy and, you know, maybe even irresponsible invocations of, like, real-life mental health struggles. I don't know, like, again, people are free to write about whatever they like in fiction, but something always does rub me the wrong way about, like, hey, your, like, psychotic delusions, they were right, actually. Like, it
Right, of course.
can be a very dangerous energy to put out into the universe.
I really have always loved the sort of existential creepypastas. Did you ever read, I was looking at Corn Connick on his profile has a list of his favorite creepypastas, and one of the ones on his list is one I remember really loving. It's not scary to me, but I just really love it. Did you ever read An Egg?
Yes, which was actually written by Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian.
Wait, really?
Yeah!
I didn't know that. I love An Egg.
So that's a great piece of trivia. If you enjoy the movie or book The Martian, that was the same guy who wrote An Egg, which is a really fascinating take on kind of reincarnation and the process of, like, samsara.
Henry, this is how I felt when I found out that the potion seller YouTube video guy was the screenwriter for Challenger.
Oh, do you want another one?
Yes.
The guy who wrote the DNA House did the screenplay for Arrival.
What?
Yeah. There is.
Well, this is also like.
There are some stars in the creepypasta world.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're in possession of some of this because C.K. Walker wrote for The Haunting of Hill House.
No, it's true, and she's kind of a friend of the show. Like, I was actually chatting with her like a couple of months ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's fun.
It's a really cool thing, and I mean, Addison, funnily enough, we mentioned him earlier, is also on kind of very pleasant, like, speaking terms with Mike Flanagan, who in one of the highlights of my life, he and Kate Siegel narrated one of my stories live at the Stanley Hotel once, and C.K. Walker, funnily enough, sent me a picture of them doing that, which brings me joy.
Oh, yeah, a fun Mike Flanagan sidebar, and Gus can decide to cut this out if it's too annoying or name droppy, I don't know, fuck it. But a fun Mike Flanagan sidebar is that at a horror convention in Los Angeles, I ran into Mike and Kate, and Mike introduced me to the man who is now my boss, James A. Janice of Dead Meat, and that is how I actually first met James.
And now Addison is counting kills.
And now I'm counting those kills, baby.
Speaking of counting kills, before we move on to the next one,
yes,
much like we kind of drew a parallel on that last one, another thing that I really loved about this is that it felt very similar to the kind of ethoses of her own work, specifically the aforementioned Kill Jam XXX. Meg described the kind of genre of the influencing machine as capitalist surrealism, which I really love as a term. And I think a very similar thing could be said of Kill Jam, which is Addison and mine's kind of bizarre, hyper-violent, hyper-queer and strange and revolutionary death game audio drama that, much like the Kingmaker Histories, you can find here or on your podcatcher of choice. And it engages with that similar things of just, like, how we're all just kind of meet under these, like, technocracies that capitalism empowers. We're all, like, resources to be commodified. And I think that's something that we, as people who have spent a lot of time as freelancers, wrote very honestly into Kill Jam in the same way that I think Corn Conic did with this.
Yeah, I don't know this person's background, but I would not be surprised if he had at some point worked in or adjacent to the tech industry.
Yeah, no, you can really feel that. But if, after you've listened to these creepypastas, you're still hankering to kind of hear more of the stuff that we love and the kind of stuff that we write, we really recommend you go listen to Kill Jam XXX. There is a whole season of it out now that you can go and enjoy, and you can hear Addison as an anime-style hot murder girl, and our dear friend Zooey LeFou as the morally bankrupt manager of said hot murder girl with a cool cyborg gun arm.
He's not bankrupt, he's just running low right now.
Well, I think he's literally bankrupt, if not morally bankrupt. Yeah. And I think that's something that we all feel. But no, that's our little plug there. Go check out Kill Jam XXX. What is our next story, Addison?
All right, so we're officially at the halfway point.
Hell yeah.
But also don't get scared. We're probably not going to spend as much time on the last few stories.
These are all, like, generally a decent standard of quality.
They're, like, exactly what I would expect from pretty solid creepypastas, if not great.
I would say, except the last one we're going to discuss today.
Yes, that has... I have thoughts about that one.
Yeah, no, the last one we are going to discuss, if you wait it out with us, if you get all the way to the end, you will be rewarded with some of the most batshit stuff you have ever heard.
You will be rewarded with something truly baffling.
Yeah, this is my impression of you in about however many minutes it takes us to get there. But anyway, all things in good time. What's our next story, Addison?
Next story is Don't Go Gazing.
Good advice.
It's true. I will say, I think the story, falls apart a little bit toward the end. But in terms of, what I hope for from a given, like a creepypasta, this is like kind of one of my favorite kinds of styles of creepypasta, which is a sort of morally ambiguously not great narrator, like not evil, but also kind of a little, like kind of not a good person. Who is doing something they shouldn't be, and it gets them into like a bad situation. Like it's something No Sleep doesn't people do anymore, and I really like a narrator of a horror story who kind of sucks.
No, it's true, because I also, like, let's be real, right? We have all heard that classic story that I believe actually happened of, like, some burglars breaking into someone's house and finding in the process of trying to steal his shit that he had some proper Scoutmaster Jeff type stuff on his laptop and called the police on him. And I think there is something so fascinating and so, like, dramatically juicy and compelling about something scary happening to someone who could not easily go and ask for help because it would be like, well, what? It's that kind of meme of I saw you at the Witch's Sabbath. Why were you at the Witch's Sabbath?
Yeah, what were you doing at the Devil's Sacrament? I was gonna say a movie that I love, that I think I told you to watch, is the movie Villains, which an underrated movie that features Micah Monroe and Bill Skarsgård as a pair of home invading burglars who get the tables turned on them by the older couple who lives at the house, and it's one of those situations, right, where it's like, what are you gonna do? You broke into their house.
No, exactly. And by the way, one of the villains in that is played by another, in my opinion, deeply underrated actor, Jeffrey Donovan, who is so good in Fargo Season 2. He's so good as Machine Head in Invincible, and he's amazing as this, like, scary, like, southern salesman with his little, like, Walt Disney mustache in Villains as well.
I love him, and I love Kira Sedgwick, the closer herself.
She's amazing. Yeah, definitely go check out Villains. But no, so basically, to give you the skinny on Don't Go Gazing, we are immediately invited into this bizarre world of the hobby that this main character calls gazing, which is basically standing outside someone's house at night and watching them through their windows for several hours. It is a very scary, like, voyeuristic thing. And I love how immediately that gets this thing started on a tone of paranoia, because, like, okay, we haven't even got to the horror bit, and already I'm having to entertain the idea that there might be people who are making a sport out of looking through my windows at night.
No, literally. It's true. And so the three rules are you can only do it for a few hours, don't leave any sort of evidence, and never go back to a place you've already been. And I love shit like this. I genuinely like this kind of setup stuff. I find so fun. I love this stuff. It's adjacent to rules horror, but it's not, because it's not like doing supernatural rules stuff. It's just like, here's a weird subculture or a weird hobby you've never thought about or doesn't maybe exist, and then so he chooses to go to a part of Utah called Park City, where he basically is going up into this sort of ski lodge area and jump off the chairlift and then, like, hide out up in the mountains and then check out some of the, like, wealthy houses up in the mountains there.
Yeah, he very much frames this as kind of, it was meant to be like the last hurrah for his gazing career. And it's this thing of, like, oh, this is kind of like I think what I love about this, I don't know about you, man, but I have a feeling we'll probably be the same here. I love hearing about people's kind of weird niche hobbies. Yes. And I love hearing about, like, the culture that exists within those hobbies. Like, my brother-in-law, Lachlan, is massively into pinball. And, like, he collects and, like, trades and modifies pinball machines.
That's sick.
And we were at a family dinner the other day, and he was explaining to me how he, like, bought these special pieces to, like, trick out this, like, vintage Godzilla pinball machine he's got that is, like, massively increases its value. He's trying to trade up the chain. And I said to him, like, oh, so, like, what's the kind of, like, what's the silver tuna? What's the, like, absolute most, like, coveted pinball machine out there? And he said, no, the most, like, the most expensive and rare and coveted one is the, like, original Evil Dead pinball machine that is out there
Yeah.
somewhere. And I have never really been much interested in pinball, but I was getting so invested hearing about the, like, inner workings of this thing. And I love that this story manages to make this both fake, I hope, and deeply sinister hobby of gazing feel equally, like, real and textured and have this, like, implied culture of it.
Yeah. No, it's true. I love that stuff. I really enjoyed especially all the establishing stuff of this. And again, I like a narrator who's like not malicious per se. Like he's not hurting anybody, but what he is doing is still kind of fucked up and creepy and wrong.
He's a bit of a dirtbag, you know.
Yeah.
He's very openly like, look, I'm spying on people. What are you gonna do? But you shouldn't do what I do.
This is my favorite kind of shitty horror protagonist. I don't like horror protagonists who are like a full blown like piece of shit monster, but I do love when they're just kind of a dirtbag.
Yeah, it's a very kind of like, I think this story, if you enjoy Nightcrawler, if you enjoy that the Michael Fassbender, David Fincher, The Killer, you'll probably really enjoy this. But this has a twist of when he gets into the freaky cursed mountain.
I'm going to tell you my prediction because it was wrong. Whenever my prediction is wrong, I like to tell you it because my prediction for this one, I just wrote a rear window scenario.
Which, I mean, a fair guess, because again, another classic, like, well, how could you report that? But no, I think this takes a really interesting turn. I think this is a really well-written story, but it manages to really maintain, like, I'll put it this way, right? When I was a teen, and I was looking for a creepypasta to read, this was what I was looking for.
Me too!
This
Me
is
too.
a platonic creepypasta.
That's what I was saying before, is like, this is like, when I was looking for creepypastas to read during study hall or whatever, this is what I was hoping to find. So he hides his car, and then takes the chairlift and jumps out, and he's like looking around. He finds a house having a party, and there's like a pool, hot tub, just like rich people stuff.
But there's like one level of the house where it seems like everyone's kind of kitted out. They're just like jiving shirtless to the music, a bit of EDM.
It's true. And then he sees a little girl going inside with her parents. And the little girl stops and looks like right in his direction. And I loved this bit. This is I love this kind of thing. I'm a simple lady about certain horror tropes and certain ways of exploring them. And this is one of them. I won't read a ton of excerpts from this story, but I love this one. There's an excellent science and learning-based channel on YouTube that I keep up with. One of their episodes had been about horror and paranoia. I bring it up because I remembered when I was looking through those binoculars that there was a popular theory that you knew when you were being looked at due to specific rays of light that can emit from someone's eyes when they look at you. It was the only way I could explain my certainty that the girl was looking right at me. She wasn't, or at least I don't think she was. Even after everything that happened, I'm not sure. I'm sure, but I am sure of the alarm that went off in my head that something was looking at me.
I really like that because I love how with just a tiny bit of additional like texture with that YouTube thing, they've taken what is effectively a horror cliche and made it feel fresh again.
Yeah, and I also love that he's like, okay, it might not have literally been her, but something was looking at me, and I love that.
And another thing that he's like repeatedly kind of stressed about the gazing like lifestyle, because this whole thing, if you're wondering, okay, like why do they do this? What's the motivation? It seems to be purely the kind of voyeuristic thrill, but he has these very specific guidelines of like you never actually enter the property ever.
No, you never cross the property line.
You're doing a very and he gives that the specific reason of like. It is the difference between potentially like a big fine and a slap on the wrist and like decades in jail.
Well, because it's
if you make the mistake here.
If you're technically on public, he says this, if you're technically on public lands but like staring at people, that might be like harassment. But if you cross onto their property line, then you're like approaching like breaking and entering and that kind of stuff.
Especially if, you know, as is the case here, you're found with, like, a backpack that has, like, night vision goggles and binoculars and all this other stuff in it. And what's really interesting is, I really love how the kind of horror element of this tests his principles and makes them life or death.
Yes.
Because, again, it's funnily enough, another thing that we kind of deal with in Killjam with Faustina's, like, kind of rules about when she won't kill people. Here is a tip, writers at home. Don't give characters rules unless you are going to put them in situations that challenges them. Mm-hmm. That is the only reason, like, yeah, principles are a good way to flesh out a character, but you are missing half the point of having those principles if you are not going to test them.
Yes. So the first thing that I was going to say tests him after it is he's by another house or an apartment building, and a woman opens the window and she's like, hey, I know someone's out there. Like, if you're a hiker, that's okay. Just tell me where you're going. If you're not a hiker, I'm going to call the cops. And he almost says something, but he's like, I don't know, something feels weird. The part that I loved this, genuinely, I love this shit. I love like a little weird. Her room, or the room she was standing in at least, was completely empty. The walls were cracked and yellow from the old paint and the dim used bulb that hung naked from a simple plug in the ceiling. A string hung down from it. There was no light switch near the door, yet the light had come on before I saw any movement in the room.
To use a little bit of a Wanna deep cut, classic lure girl.
Lure girls, shut up. No, also, I love the bit where he's like, I don't know if I'm remembering this wrong, but like, I think this is what I remember happening, is that after a certain distance, I was a certain distance away, she stopped talking, and when she went quiet, the light went off.
Yes, it gives it that very kind of anglerfish quality. I really like, as is the case in a lot of classic sort of fae stories, that I think this very much draws from, where, you know, transgression is death. I really like how much this story plays on the kind of the horror of things that flare up your instincts in different ways. I think that is something that is, you know, you and me, Addison, who have both been very public about having OCD scratches our brains in a certain way.
It does, yeah. The next thing that happens is he's confronted by the police, or is he? The part that I love is that he notices that they say, I love shit like that. I just really like smart protagonists. Is they say get up from the ground. And he's not on the ground. He's standing up behind a tree.
Yeah.
And he's like,
no, again,
that's not right.
I think what's great about this is, and I think it goes into this smart character thing of, the problem with a lot of creepypasta is, forget smart characters. I think a lot of people are so obsessed with the kind of every man it could happen to you thing, they forget to write characters at all. And I think what's great about how this character sort of conducts himself and approaches things is that we have already been sold from the beginning that this is an extremely, like, cautious, meticulous dude. And that keeps paying off over the course of the story.
Yeah, it's true. So obviously, the other thing about that is he also says, the longer I waited, the more scared I became. Not because the voices got louder or closer, but because they stayed the same.
Yeah, that's very, so many different, like, kind of frightening creatures from different lore have that frightening thing of being able to throw their voice, or in some kind of freaky cases, I love that classic thing you see in so many mythologies of, the further away they sound, the closer they are, and vice versa.
Oof. Oh, I didn't know that, and that just made
so scary.
That just gave me the tummy hurts in a way that none of the stories did.
Yeah, I know that is a thing that I've heard in lore for a bunch of different monsters. This idea of if you can hear them up close, you are relatively safe. If you hear them and they sound like they're far away, they're close.
Henry, that's really scary, and I had not heard that before.
It is really scary. And here's the thing, I'm not going to show my ass and say any monsters that I have heard that this is true for, because especially with any creatures that are supposed to be from indigenous mythologies, I know there's a lot of white people bullshit out there that has been attributed to them that isn't at all a part of the original legends. So feel free to just say which monsters this apply to in the comments and stop me from embarrassing myself. But yeah, it's great lore, and it plays into this wonderfully.
So then he realizes, obviously, these are not real cops. He runs. there's the sound of gunshots, but he doesn't stop and he doesn't drop to the ground. And he's like, it's crazy that the gun didn't hit me. There must absolutely not have been real guns.
Again, yeah, he never loses his head.
With a target as large and slow as I was, it would have been harder to miss me than not.
I love things that do kind of hold their cards close enough to their chest that right up until the very end, you are earnestly just like, what the fuck is going on here?
It's true. The last thing, because things come in threes, the last thing that he encounters did a little bit take me out of it. We've talked about this together.
Yeah, same. Mm-hmm.
The last thing is he sees people tied up on St. Andrew's crosses, connected with confetti streamers. Just kidding, they're not confetti streamers, they're intestines.
Yeah, it's like if we're now at the kind of like ultra extreme sex party cult period of the proceedings, it's one of those things where, and look, I've done it too, with some of my stories, but it is just one of those things where, man, a little restraint goes a long way. But I get it, that it is so hard in that, like, final moment to not be like, oh, this feels like it needs something big at the end.
I did like... The bit that I did like from this exchange is when they're basically like, please help us, we're in danger, please. And he almost does. He like trips and he falls down the hill and he almost like ends up where they are. And it says, they watched my hand so near the border between the yard and the forest with an eagerness I haven't seen before or since.
Oh, I love that. And again, I love just that whole thing of like I said, that very Fae-coded, the transgression of boundaries means doom.
It's like if he if he crosses that property line, if he crosses that line, then he will be got by whatever is doing
this. He belongs to them now.
Yeah.
And I do, even though the kind of St. Andrew's Cross and the guts was a little bit try-hard, I do, at the very least, respect that they never hit us with some, like, 11th hour explanation.
No. He gets away from the last group of people, and I just enjoy that he sees... The last thing... Actually, I lied. The last thing he sees is he sees his car. He sees his car just sitting on a hill. And then he grabs his keys and he hits the lock button and he hears his real car off in the distance beep because it's the lock button, and he says, nice try.
That's a great little moment. Honestly, a lot of this like last period where it's just like throwing all the stuff at us really does make me kind of think of the big climax of As Above, So Below, which you actually wrote the kill count for on Dead Meat. Just that period where it's kind of like, yeah, just everything. Just all the supernatural things. The car, the people on the crosses with their guts hanging out, the cops are here. Like, it is pulling out all the stops to try to get him to, like, transgress.
It's like, come on, do it. But then he actually makes it to his real car. And then he checks the Google images of the area where he was, and he sees that none of the houses he saw are there.
Oh, so honestly, all in all, really solid little creepypasta.
Really solid.
Doesn't reinvent the wheel. I think, again, it's so funny, dude. A lot of these, I have found myself feeling a lot more charitable to them in the discussion than I was in some cases after directly finishing reading them.
Well, I think because mindset can be a huge part of it, and if you read a bunch in a row, you're, like, tired and you want to be done with it, and you're like, I don't want to... I'll say, I think if I had to rank them, that I do think, it would not be a shock to say that The Influencing Machine was my favorite, but, like, I do think that my second favorite was Don't Go Gazing.
Yeah, no, it's true, and I think there are definitely some people in the audience who would probably put like the Twisting Withers higher, and do you know what? I respect that.
It's just
I think
a matter of
comes
personal
down
taste.
to taste.
Yeah.
Again, anyone when they finish this, if they want to actually put a ranking listing, because we will at the end as well, you're more than welcome to let us know what it is, because with 8, that's a lot easier to do than 5. Mm-hmm. Speaking of, shall we pop to the next one?
Yes, I really enjoyed this one. I think it was very predictable, but I also really enjoyed it, and I will fully admit that partially that is because it was pandering to me.
I think you got to declare some biases here at the story TSA, Addison.
I got to declare some biases for it being an Appalachia set story that does not use any of the Appalachia tropes that I hate. and a story that pulls a lot from Irish folklore and is set on Halloween.
Yeah, and is a ritual, and I know that you're a big fan of your kind of good ritual pastas, your hide and seek alone.
I'm a ritual pasta enjoyer.
Bloody Marys. This story is called Dumb Supper.
Yes.
Which, this is dumb in the sense of the kind of archaic term for, like, silent, not as in it's a stupid supper.
I am going to tell you the prediction I made for this one that I was so blissfully wrong is I wrote cannibalism, ? One other note, and I wrote Appalachia. If there's incest, I'll scream. Dumb Supper is about two sisters, Odessa and Dolly, who are, living in Appalachia in an undisclosed time period, but like, olden timey. No, because their dad was laid off in 1871, so it's like late 1800s. So their aunt comes to visit, and she's from Ireland. She's like a distant aunt, and she's like a great aunt or something. She's like she's like vaguely like not necessarily like a she was married to the brother of the girl's mother. So she's
yeah, but she still feels a sense of ownership over them because she knows they have a hard.
Oh, I just meant like to explain why she's from another country. They're from West Virginia specifically, by the way, the girls. So I got really hype and then immediately nervous. But the aunt, she comes to visit them, and she teaches them this ritual because she knows that they want to get out of there. Like Odessa wants to leave really badly, and she wants to take her sister with her. And she's like, I want to meet the man I'm going to marry because I want to get married and get out of here. And Adeline's like, if you really want to know who you're going to marry, I can teach you a ritual. And it's a dumb supper where you do these ritual steps, and you have this silent candlelight supper on Halloween night. And then you're either supposed to see a vision of the man you're going to marry, or he'll like in a fugue state, like wander into the house. And this, by the way, is very fun. I was very tickled by this because it's actually very similar to some of the possible proposed origins for the Bloody Mary myth.
Yeah, and isn't there that kind of apple peel one as well that's related to finding out who your future husband is?
One of the proposed origins for the Bloody Mary myth is a game that young women played in the Victorian era where they would walk backwards or like look in a mirror in candlelight and do all these different steps, and they were supposed to have Bloody Mary or like original versions of Bloody Mary or similar ghost type ladies appear and tell you the name of your future husband. So I was just very tickled by all of that setup. And then there's just sort of a lot of build up, and then it's a pretty simple story. They do it, and then they do the aunt teaches them the ritual and leaves them to do it on Halloween night by themselves, and they do it. They're interrupted by their father, who is obviously really angry, and he's like, this is devil worship, and I'm going to teach you girls a lesson. Before he can hurt them,
he's generally like a kind of abusive, mean I think he backhands one of them. It's like some pretty gnarly stuff.
It is. And then a demon shows up and kills their dad. And Dolly's basically like, I think it's established that Dolly had the gift that would make the ritual work. And she, basically she's like, I'm sorry, I didn't, like, the aunt is basically like, whatever kind of man you're thinking of is the kind of man who will show up. And Dolly's like, I called it. Sorry, I called the demon here so it would kill. If we could just get rid of Pa, then things would get better. Maybe now we can go live with Auntie.
This falls into that classic, like, sort of creepypasta subgenre of, like, justice porn.
Yes.
Creepypasta. But I think it is one where... Yeah, no, that's the thing. I think it's an enjoyable little thing. It doesn't outstay its welcome. And I think what really sets it apart is just that kind of fun Appalachian flavor that it has to it.
And I really liked the ritual of it. Like, I think the ritual is a fun sort of new piece of texture. I was expecting it to, go wrong somehow. I just wasn't sure how. And I liked that. It was nice after I made myself very nervous about thinking about horrible things happening to these young girls. It was nice that nothing bad happened to them.
Yeah, and I did, when the demon is, like, dismembering the dad, I did enjoy the comparison to, like, pulling apart, like, a roast chicken for dinner. I thought that was a fun, like, little evocative bit of prose.
The demon's having his supper, too.
Exactly. Though actually he's not, because he doesn't have a face. He just has two, like, eye holes.
Oh, true.
He literally just rips their dad to pieces, then, like, bounces out the door he came through.
Honestly, he didn't overstay his welcome.
He's just like, I'm out. Bounces right out. Like,
I think that's fine.
No, it's true, and that's the thing. I think that's the saving grace of the whole story, is that it's a fun little thing where even if you see the ending coming when you're about halfway through, you would need to be someone with a very short attention span to say it wasted your time.
Yeah, it's a fun little thing. Also, it was written for a Halloween contest, so I'm like, yeah, it's just a fun little Halloween story.
Funnily enough, it was Corn Conic's Halloween contest.
Oh, funny. I also...
Our boy from the influencing machine.
Yeah, so I'll admit that I was pandered to, but I also... I just think it was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. I think... That's the thing. I think this and the next one are the ones that, frankly, I have the least to say about.
I have the least to say about the next story. It is very paint by numbers. It is perfectly adequately done. It is perfectly solidly written. It is just very paint by numbers.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I feel kind of bad because it's a case of, like, the problem is, the fault is not in our stars, it's in ourselves here, you know, because I think if I was someone who wasn't me, I might have very different opinions on this. If I wasn't as kind of jaded.
I've read too many creepypastas.
Things. Yeah, so, okay, this next one is called Dead Men Tell No Tales. It's a epistolary kind of found diary story that is discovered in the Indo-Pak border, and it's this kind of diary left by a soldier called Private Ravi Singh, who is describing it like his kind of team's deployment into this mountainous region. And the kind of menacing force that is, like, picking them off one by one, told entry by entry.
There's some very, like, good and evocative prose in here. It's just, I think it is something I've read a lot of this kind of thing before, and it made it hard for me to feel affected by any of it.
Yeah, this is every The Slaughter episode of the Magnus Archives, is this,
I did really,
you know?
like the way it was written. Like, I really liked the, like, voice of the main narrator. I pulled 2 quotes from the beginning. Every time we start walking, we hear steps all around us, not ours and completely out of rhythm, too light, too deliberate. Our thermosensors don't detect anything either, just the chilling desolation around us. Pit-pat, pit-pat, pit-pat. The sound has seated itself in my mind and I can't seem to dibble it away. It is becoming harder to separate what is real and what is not. Like, I like that. It's just...
That's the thing. This to me has the opposite problem of The Sinking House. The Sinking House was some really interesting ideas that were dragged down by just prose that wasn't up to snuff. This is really solid, competent prose supporting ideas that just aren't that interesting.
Yes, really, really overdone ideas.
Because in essence, it is like ghostly supernatural forces in the fog luring out and killing different soldiers and then like using their form to do the same. It feels to me like very kind of like when people say, hey, I've written like a supernatural like war horror story, 9 times out of 10 it's this.
Yeah, and it does the thing that we talked about off mic that we both don't like, where it's like, I need to keep writing. I'm so scared, but I gotta keep writing this down. Why am I even writing this down? It's like...
Yeah, and like even things like, again, let's be real, if you were writing a diary, would you write pit-pat 3 times, thinking you're the only one who's gonna read this back?
You're not wrong.
You know, I think it is this problem of... In the same way that a lot of found footage movies make the mistake of seeming way too written, when all the best found footage stuff keeps its verisimilitude by having very naturalistic dialogue. Like, you know, the Blair Witch Project didn't have a script. They were given points that they needed to hit, and they just kind of worked around it.
Also, man, I forgot. Sorry, please keep talking. I just forgot that the story ends with this weird little afternote.
Yeah, I know, it's weird, and we'll get to that in a second, but I think what I was kind of taking the very long road to getting to there is, like, not enough things that are told through diaries are written in that kind of semi-shorthand that people write real diaries in.
It's true. So the little end of the journal entry is accompanied by a note that just says, the last page is half burnt. I didn't burn the journal.
And, like, what does that mean?
Then
that,
who
like,
was
the
burned?
monsters came at it with a match? Just the last page?
Then who was burned?
I want to believe that Private Singh was doing that thing that, did you ever as a kid be like, I'm going to make a treasure map?
Yes.
I'm going to get a piece of paper, draw a map on it, and I'm going to like coffee stain it and then burn the edges to make it look cool. I think he was like, oh, when this is found after I'm dead, I want it to look like the sickest lost diary ever.
Truly, it's like, because there's nothing fire-related in the story, so it's like, hey, what?
Yeah, no, I think ultimately this is just one of those ones that I feel bad, and I think of any, this would be the one that I am most open to people in the comments saying, oh, I couldn't disagree more on this. Because I think our feelings on this one are the most subjective.
Yeah, I really do think there are people for whom this will work much better. I love the tags on stories in the Creepypasta wiki because this one's tagged with diary/journal, disappearances, history, military, nature, and beings.
Beings.
I just really enjoy the beings.
Beings. Well, do you know what? I think our audience has been patient for long enough. We will be getting on to our last story now, and it is, for my money, the most mental one we've discussed today.
It is, to be fair, tagged with food and weird.
Yeah, it earns both. My fucking, jaw was open for just the latter half of this, just like... What? Have you ever had a friend, I'm not going to ask you to name names here, who is like, do you mind if I confide something in you? And they just tell you the most fucking insane shit you've ever heard. It's like the Sam Rockwell giving that, deranged monologue about Asian girls to Walton Goggins in The White Lotus. And it's just like, That's how I felt reading Don't Eat the Sandwiches.
Okay, because it starts with the narrator's the narrator's grandfather is in a retirement home. And it's about him visiting and spending time with his grandpa in the retirement home. And at first I was like, oh, that's fun. I think I even wrote down, it was like, retirement homes are really rich settings for horror stories, but it will not have anything to do with the horror story.
I believe there is even... an upcoming fucking Pete Davidson horror movie set at a retirement home.
It's out.
There you go.
But two very mixed reviews. I haven't seen it. But it's true. I think they're an interesting and underutilized setting for horror stuff, but that doesn't matter because it actually has nothing to do with the story at all.
Yep.
Although you wouldn't know that because we do spend a lot of time talking about all the activities they have at the retirement home.
Yeah, no, this feels like such a loving ode to the relationship that this guy has with his grandfather. And grandfather. And where it goes from there. If we gave you 1,000,000 guesses, you wouldn't fucking get it.
Yep. I'm drinking some seltzer 1 second.
Yep. So, okay, while Addison is drinking her seltzer, It gets, after this absolutely, luxuriating description on the elemental bond between a boy and his granddad. The boy ages up and he's going to leave for college, and his granddad's health is taking a turn for the worst, and knowing that any time that they meet up might be the last time, Grandpa decides to confide a piece of wisdom into his grandson. I think, what's the insane way they put it of, tell this to your most devoted grandchild?
Let's see.
Yeah, what is the exact word? Because the word is not...
Oh, yes, my most devoted grandchild.
It's, you are the first person I am telling this story to. I told myself I would only tell my most devoted grandchild the story in the hopes they would not...
and he says you must promise me that you will only tell this story to your most devoted grandchild, so every generation is given a fair warning, so fuck your son, I guess.
It literally, it's just this case of, I think it skips a generation, the utterly fucking deranged knowledge that you at home are about to hear us share.
But he says every generation.
I think Granddad's a little bit senile.
Yeah, so he's gonna talk about the grandma. He's like, I wish when we got married I could have treated her better. If I treated her better, maybe she wouldn't have turned out like that.
And whatever you're thinking, it's weirder. I'm gonna let you take this, Addison, because I feel like it would be weird for me to say it.
It's true. I can't fucking stand the way that this grandpa's like... Back in the 50s, men were kings of the house, and it was the way it was. And I was like that, and I was mean to your grandma.
And it's like, I'm sorry, I get that it was definitely a more, like, sexist and patriarchal time, but I don't think it is a case of literally every man was a piece of shit then, and that's the way it was. Like, not to not all men this, but it's really bizarre, kind of like, oh, well, you know, what do you expect me to do? It was the 50s, I was a piece of fucking shit.
I insisted she always dress up, wear makeup, and put on her fine jewelry when managing the house. No wife of mine was going to be a slob and get me mocked by the neighbors.
And it's like, no, Grandpa, I think you were, like, a particularly horrible person.
This quote kills me. I suppose we were both victims of the culture at that time.
Me and the wife I was constantly denigrating and abusing. Both victims.
We were both the victim.
I think we all sing.
He saw her weeping to herself alone as she made dinner in the kitchen.
Yeah, and I love this bit later on where it's like, oh, she fucked up dinner once. And I was like, oh, don't worry about it, honey. Just make me a sandwich instead.
Actually, he said, make us a new dinner. And if you can't do that, then just make me a sandwich.
Like, this genuinely might be, like, the most unsympathetic character we've met in one of these. And, like, Scoutmaster Jeff was a nonce.
She laughed a bit, and I laughed along, too. The whole situation was a bit comical.
Like, was it? Was it, Grandpa?
And he's like, after that, she didn't cry anymore.
Score one, Grandpa.
And then my friend Jerry went missing. And then my other friend went missing. And the housewives tried to find him, but they couldn't find him.
So yeah, no, I sat at home on my fucking lazy ass and sent my wife and her friends out to find him.
To find my missing friends.
Insane.
The incident brought the community closer together. The housewives formed their own club, which became a national sorority. I was one of the people who always wondered what happened to Jerry and Stan. They were good friends, and I was always sad to lose them. So when the grandma's health was failing, he was like, they were talking about it. And then she brought up all the great things she cooked while we were looking for them.
I wonder what happened.
I wonder.
This, by the way, is not a subversion of expectations. The sandwiches were, in fact.
No.
Doty Grandpa's horrible friends.
I still don't understand this. Or, I mean, I do. I just think it's not a good line. I recalled all her meals with warmth, but was confused as to why she would have brought them up when I was talking about my old friends. And they talked about she smiled and she said, "They've already been cooked, dear." What does that mean? Anyway.
Maybe she was a Gen Z grandma. Like, oh, they're cooked.
Yeah, they're cooked.
I also just love this idea again. This guy was a piece of shit all the way to the end. He's like at his wife's deathbed, and he's like, Jerry was such a great dude. I wish he was here to enjoy this with me.
And then she's like, I cooked them along with all of the people you complained about at your job. Only 2 people went missing, I thought. Oh, no, I see. She says, I made sure the supervisors who were bullying you moved away. Of course, they didn't really go anywhere other than my cooking pot.
I love that this guy, again, is just such a, like, comically, like, aloof 50s man that his wife was, like, killing scores of people. And he never suspected anything.
Nope. No idea.
But that's not the crazy part.
Oh, no. Also, there's a writing error that I wrote down.
Which one?
Shortly after, your grandmother told me that she passed away peacefully in her sleep.
That was nice of her to tell me that.
What was that supposed to be?
I think it was shortly after she told me that, your grandmother passed away peacefully in her sleep. Well,
yeah, but it's formatted as shortly after, your grandmother told me that she passed away peacefully in her sleep. Punctuation matters.
Yeah, let's eat, Grandma.
Okay, so he started reading through her old journals and found out that the women's club she started, the Jersey White Hat Club, would kill and punish all the men who bothered them. There were recipes for poisons, instructions on how to psychologically torture people. So many dark things that I don't even want to repeat them.
How convenient.
Taking a friend of the troublesome men in their lives and serving it to him in the form of food. Recipes for cooking and preparing human beings. Yeah.
Like, some of this is a little bit repetitive, admittedly. But, no, it's
all over the place. Every chapter of the sorority across the United States was practicing the dark rituals from the grandmother's journals.
Yeah, this is like a massive thing.
And the advice he wants to give is specifically not like don't abuse your wife because maybe it'll make her snap and do murders, but it's if you meet a girl wearing a white opal stone shaped like a moon on her left ring finger, do not have a relationship with her.
Yeah, like, this is genuinely, like, I think this is a case of, so, this story was written by an author who is, to the best of my knowledge, female. So, this is not, like, just a kind of, like, insane, like,
Yeah.
like, misogynistic screed.
No, it's trying to be, and it says, and never mock a girl by asking her to make you a sandwich. Don't demand anything from her. Treat her equal. Okay.
And it's so funny because it's like, that never felt like a risk with this narrator, who seemed like someone who had never expressed any, like, dodgy views, and in fact, you know, like, goes out of their way to be like, yeah, I always go and, like, visit my, like, lonely grandpa and play backgammon with him in the retirement home on Sundays. It's like, they seem like a really chill individual.
My favorite part, though, is at the end, he's at the funeral, and he suddenly notices that, like, every woman in his family has that ring on, something somehow the grandfather never noticed.
Which is also so funny, because it's like, even without this backstory, how fucking aloof do you have to be to not notice that literally every woman in your family wears a matching opal ring?
No, literally.
Like...
And it's like,
that's insane.
How was the grandfather not aware of that when he knew that the ring was a calling card? And he's like, if you ever see a woman doing that, you know, like my own daughter.
Yeah, unless they inexplicably all only started wearing them to the funeral.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Like, this is one of the oddest stories, and I love that it goes from, like, you know, my grandpa had some advice to dispatch to, like misandrist, like, Lady Vengeance, Project Mayhem, Cannibal, crew, nationwide, and everyone's in on it.
Nationwide Lady Cannibal cult.
Like, what an insane thing to come out of this premise. And I love that, yeah, it's shared like it's wisdom, and it's basically Grandpa being like, I am the worst guy you've ever met. Avoid women with these rings, they're cannibals.
Avoid women with the cannibal ring, and I am a piece of shit.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like, even outside of the cannibal ring thing, it's got to be a bummer to be this guy and be like, man, I spent so much time with my grandpa. He was a real bastard. Like, I had no idea he treated my grandmother so badly that she snapped and became a prolific serial killer and cult leader.
Literally.
Like, my God.
Like, I get what it's kind of trying to do. It's like, oh, like, living under patriarchy makes things, like, you know, cycle of violence, whatever, I guess. But, like, what?
I think for me, it's just the contrast. It's all of the weird little things, like how much time we spend hearing about the fucking shuffleboard and backgammon at the start of the story, and the very, like, kind of non-ostentatious prose to then go into this just absolute, like, a hyper-ambitious madness.
Oh, yeah.
It's such whiplash.
It's also funny because the story implies at the end that the reason that he didn't know, that he or the grandfather didn't know, is that the grandfather kept the family out of the investigation. And I'm like, I don't think that they could have done that I don't think that's how that investigations work.
Yeah, no, literally. Like, no fucking way. It can't just be, I have friends on the force, so they kept me out of the, like, look, I'm sorry, not to do too much of a cinema sins on this, but it's like, if we are looking at a nation-spanning kind of terrorist murder cannibal cult, this is not the local police, this is the fucking FBI, and they're not going to do you the courtesy of, like, not getting you involved.
No, they're not going to not investigate your family when your wife was the ringleader of a, like, nationwide cult.
Yeah, like, I mean, for a start, they'd want to make sure that fucking you weren't in it.
Literally.
Like, it is so crazy. It involves so many of these just bizarre leaps of logic. And it feels like the narrator, despite being first person, has such muted reaction to finding this out. And just the fact that, like, in the universe where this happened, that this wouldn't be, like, one of the biggest news stories ever. Like, Charles Manson
Literally.
killed, or, like, had killed such a tiny number of people compared to this. And he's, like, one of the most, like, iconically scary
Right.
dudes.
I think the part that really breaks the immersion for me is the reveal that he ever went to the police about it. Because, like, that's not gonna not be public.
Yeah, this would be the biggest story ever.
Also, I'm obsessed with at the end where it's like, they're realizing every woman is wearing the ring in their family, and they're like, and the walls felt more and more like they were closing in on me. And it's like, well, then maybe just be nice to women, and then none of them will have to eat you.
Yeah, that's the thing. We don't have any indication that this guy is anything other than, like, a pretty chill dude. Like, it's weird. It's really fucking. It would be really. Sorry, I just thought it'd be really funny if we didn't draw attention to it, but we got Meg to just draw a little ring onto your Monster Sona for this one, and people might be like, "Where's
I've got
a
the
ring
little
in this
opal
one?"
moon ring.
But no, just
I'm in the fucking
what was it?
thing.
The Jersey White Hat Society. You heard of the Jersey boys? The Jersey girls are very different.
Jersey White Hat Society.
Yeah, let's see
I'm
if this is
Googling
a
it.
thing.
No, oh, it's like a parody or like a thing on the Oh, there is a White Hat Society.
Oh damn! Oh fuck!
Not Jersey though.
I know too much.
No, it's like a Rotary Club thing.
Just fucking peculiar. All I can say, man. A deeply
think it
odd
might
one
be-
to end on.
Yeah, it's a Rotary Foundation thing. Also, I think it might also be a loose reference to the Red Hat Society.
And how do we know that any of those aren't fronts for sprawling cannibal terrorist cults of women?
That's a really good point.
This feels like something that, like, Alex Jones would, like, scream about on one of his broadcasts while, like, having a normal one.
All the women are cannibals.
They will eat your ass!
So yeah, that's the last story.
That was our journey into the Creepypasta Wiki. I think my personal ranking would be The Influencing Machine, Don't Go Gazing, Twisted Withers, Dumb Supper, I regret closing the tabs. Those would be the top one. I think, again, I think, to be honest, having discussed it more, I would now actually put maybe either the Don't Eat the Sandwiches or Happy Sunday Care at the bottom, because I think
so too.
after discussing it, I've at least come around to there are some really interesting ideas in the Sinking House.
It's true. Also, by the way, we promised to tell you the Sinking House is the one that was pasta of the month 2 months in a row.
Which, honestly, again, having gone through them all now, doesn't feel as egregious as if it was Don't Eat the Sandwiches.
Literally.
Because what a bloody absurd story. We would love
what
to
are we
hear
doing?
your... We would love to hear your ranking if you made it all the way through. We'd love to hear your suggestions for ones you'd like us to cover in a future video. We'd love for you to go check out the Kingmaker Histories and Killjoy XXX if you'd like to hear some of our writing and acting. And just in general, we love you for being here.
And I'd love for you to let me in your window. I'm outside right now. Let me in.
I'll see you at 3 a.m. if you survive Addison. Goodbye!
Bye.